rising above the harbor as her torch held high. To you, it seems a gesture of farewell, for you're leaving the States, shoving off for France, whose citizens gave us that statue in token of their friendship. You're on your way to a country where you will be the stranger, the foreigner. And so you wonder, what will it be like? How will you be welcomed? But most important, why? Why are you being sent there? Other Americans went to France in 1917 to meet the Prussian threat against our way of life. Again, they sailed in World War II, this time to halt the Nazi tide. Now once more Americans go to France, where once again our rights and liberties are threatened. Since World War II, 8 of Soviet Russia's neighboring countries have been engulfed by communist domination, all part of a world plan that means enslavement, an end to national and personal freedom. Meanwhile, in those European countries still free of the Soviet yoke, the Communist Party operates as a fifth column, disrupting and dividing until it can take over as it did in Czechoslovakia. That is its goal today in Italy, in Belgium, and Holland, and in France. The men of 14 free nations are now united to stop any Kremlin attempt at aggression. That united effort is called NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Its headquarters just outside of Paris is SHAPE, abbreviation for Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. We are members of NATO, and to help us carry out our part in the effort, France has permitted us to build and maintain installations, air bases, and a supply line from the port of Bordeaux across northern France. Your own share in NATO's job lies in France. That's why you're going there. The far-off France to which you travel covers an area which, in terms of our own country, is about the same size as the land east of the Mississippi and north of the Ohio rivers. You do not go there as a tourist, and yet you may find greater opportunities than do most tourists to know France. The France of Paris, the city of light. The France of cathedral towns, where men raised up expressions of their religious faith centuries before our own America had been discovered. Hilltop monasteries and cities rich in reminders that here is a civilization dating back to the Roman Caesars. In contrast are those modern resort and vacation spots where luxury and leisure draw pleasure seekers from all corners of the world. Here too is rural France, whose lush vineyards and farms have long proven the excellence of French agricultural products. Picturesque scenery amid the towering French Alps, attracting the amateur climber and all those who thrill to winter sports. But a country also means people. The Frenchman is the fisherman from Brittany, the Alsatian coal miner, the Norman dairy farmer, the grower of grapes and champagne, the Bourbonnais sheep raiser, the merchant of Provence. People as varied as any cross-section of our own population. But as your ship docks, there still remains that other question. How will you be welcomed? You've heard stories, perhaps from other servicemen, about indifference, even resentment. Any truth? Yes. But that yes calls for explanation. Naturally, there are always a few people who dislike strangers. You know some in your own hometown. But it's quite possible, too, that you'll see frankly hostile newspapers sold openly on the streets. From time to time, you may come across posters and placards that tell you to go home, you're not wanted. Even an occasional incident like this. But all of these are the work of your enemy and France's enemy. within liberal French government, that enemy has its representatives. Whatever may be your own opinion, the French prefer to keep the Communist Party a legal party, thereby operating in the open. Today, however, its prestige and influence has dwindled, and its numbers have shrunk. Today, out of a population of 42 million people, there are no more than 400,000 card-carrying members of the Communist Party, only about 1%. But that 1% is a well-organized and active minority. It follows the dictates of Soviet Russia. It is guided by a corps of Moscow-trained militants who have worked their way into the ranks of French labor. For a time, that 1% exercised an influence over France out of all proportion to its size. It fomented industrial strife, organized demonstrations, and touched off public violence. Worse, it influenced thousands of patriotic Frenchmen who had never been communists to take part in their demonstrations and disorders. Why was that 1% able to win such support? For an answer, we must turn to French history. 3 times within the last 90 years, France has been invaded and laid waste. The Franco-Prussian War had brought death to the youth of the nation. World War I, nearly 1,500,000 Frenchmen killed, a number greater than the combined populations of our own Maine and New Hampshire. World War II, death for 650,000 French men and women, a figure that would take in all the people of South Dakota. For many Frenchmen between the ages of 20 and 50, it meant years of internment in German prison camps. It meant destruction or damage to 1/5 of all French property. Transportation facilities were either destroyed or confiscated. The industry of France lay in ruins. With France's tragic defeat at the hands of a nation whose economy for years had been geared solely to war, a feeling of hopelessness and despair swept across the land. But during the years of the occupation came the assertion of France's hope and faith in itself. Underground movements were formed to resist the invader. Only when Soviet Russia had been drawn into the war did the communists join in the fight against the Nazis. With D-Day and the successful Allied invasion, these groups came out into the open. They grew in strength and helped in the liberation of their beloved Paris. Elsewhere, while our armies were hammering their way to Berlin from the west, the Red armies were moving from the east. The communists started a vigorous campaign to sell the people on their ideology. Allied victory, to every Frenchman there came a feeling of complete and utter weariness with war. It was a feeling sharpened by the bankrupt economy and the magnitude of the reconstruction job that lay ahead. But in that post-war period, there reawakened that same spirit which had enabled France to rise above earlier tragedies. The enormous job of clearing and rebuilding went forward with energy and determination. our own country came Marshall Plan aid. Grain and food cargoes at first, for the war had crippled French agriculture. Then man-made products, tiny ball bearings for the bicycles upon which millions of Frenchmen depend for transportation. Mammoth machines fully assembled, ready upon delivery to take part in the friendly effort of helping revive prostrate French industry. Even entire systems to bring electric power and new rolling stock to France's destroyed railroads. Today, in a rebuilt and rapidly recovering France, the communist appeal is wearing thin. Consider Monsieur Santel, an automobile worker, who has in the past voted communist, but was never a party member. Monsieur Santel and millions like him now reject their propaganda. He will make his election choice within a range of parties that represents every possible shade of political opinion. Parties so numerous as to bewilder the American who is used to his two-party system. Monsieur Santel lives in a small apartment that lacks many of the conveniences that you may take for granted. Because of war and post-war conditions, its upkeep and repair have been neglected. Let us visit the Santel home and meet a typical working-class family. They are well aware of the difference between their living standards and ours, a situation that can breed jealousy and dislike. Nevertheless, their friendship is yours, depending on your own attitude, and an understanding of the Santel's way of life makes a good beginning. France has been called a family of families. The family is a close-knit unit, the nucleus. Multiplied, it becomes the nation. Within the family, father is king. A genuine affection freely displayed cements family relationships under his authority. Frank display of affection may puzzle you, but you'll soon realize that, like politeness, it is an integral part of French character. Within her own precincts, the household and the marketplace, Madame Santel commands not merely affection, but respect. Maman to her children. To you, she will be described as Madame ma mère, Madame my mother. Since her husband's salary is $67 a month, about average for industrial workers, the odd penny or the extra potato are matters of vital importance. Good food, well prepared, is more important to the Frenchman than are modern appliances to the American. And so shopping is a serious business to the housewife. Besides the industrial worker like Monsieur Santel, you will meet France's famous petit bourgeois, the small businessman. You may find the leisurely way he conducts his affairs surprising, quite different from our pace. Lacking in enterprise? Not at all. He is clinging to a custom that enriches his life. The long noonday closing means he can dine with his family, as do most Frenchmen. Perhaps, too, he can visit the neighborhood café for a chat with friends. To him, the café is his club, home away from home. And by the way, he pays for this pleasant custom by keeping his shop open an extra hour or two in the evening. The country to which you travel is not solely a land of industry and business. So extensive is her agriculture that in good times, France feeds not only her own people, but produces a sizable surplus for export to others. Possession of those rich farmlands and fertile soil has all too often been the motive behind the cruel invasions France has known. About 21 million people, or 1/2 of her population, live on farms. And so you will probably meet men like Monsieur Beaumont, who works the soil on which his ancestors lived, and who in time will pass it on to his own son. The Beaumonts own a small power tractor, but generally you won't see much modern farm machinery. This isn't indifference or hostility to progress. Unlike our own farms, the typical French holding is less than 25 acres. Experienced farmers know that most modern equipment is impractical on tracts that small. The neighboring village with its parish church and single street is Monsieur Beaumont's contact with the outside world and the source of whatever social life he may find time to enjoy. Like all Frenchmen, he is politically minded, and like most farmers, he and his neighbors vote in the ranks of the conservative parties. Apart from the roles played by the church and town, for Monsieur Beaumont, as well as with all Frenchmen, it is in the family that his life is centered. For him, mealtime means a drawing together of all its members for conversation and relaxation. No meal can be complete without wine, the boasted product of France's soil. It cheers while it nourishes, and for the Frenchman it is both food and drink. It is his centuries-old heritage, and he uses it wisely and with pleasure. You will find the Frenchman's contempt for drunkenness even greater than your own. Whatever their walk of life, they appreciate their national drink and treat it with respect. Observe them in their working men's bistros. Observe them in their club-like neighborhood cafes. Observe them in the smart bars and restaurants of the cities. You will be struck by their moderation. Any distorted ideas you may have on that subject will change, and fast. Speaking of distorted ideas, let's get around to an old subject, the easy pickup. Just as in your own hometown, you'll come across her in France. Our homegrown type doesn't represent American womanhood. The French pickup doesn't represent French womanhood. French girls aren't like that, and for two very good reasons. The first of these is family influence. When Monsieur Beaumont's daughter and her fiancé go dating, Madame Beaumont goes right along. In many families, this custom of chaperoning daughters continues until marriage. Modern city living is discouraging that old custom. However, Monsieur Santel's daughter must present her most casual date for approval, the sizing up that American parents practice. The second safeguard of morality is religion, which is a major influence among Frenchmen. Roman Catholicism predominates, but there are Protestant and Jewish congregations too. Freedom of conscience is a basic French right. Religion and family have instilled in most French girls a high code of personal conduct. Ignore that fact and you'll offend. Recognize it and you'll enlarge your chances for warm and gratifying friendship.